salute to the flag. And begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
which is one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. May we have the roll call, please?
Vice Chair Bill de la Peña.
Present.
Director Huffer.
Yes.
Director Jones.
here.
Director Nichols.
Yes.
Chair Skay.
Here. Thank you. And we don't have any public comments. We do have some folks that registered comments, but did not ask to speak, and those will be included in the record. One from Mark Lichak, and one from Bonnie Clarfield Bylan, and one anonymous. Those will be in the record. Thank you. Any presentations or announcements? None. Let's go to the consent calendar. This is the meeting minutes of February 12th.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
this is Claudia Bill de la Peña. I do have a question regarding public comments. You said that they were emails that were received? Or did I mishear that?
I assume they were via email.
They're comment cards that
Comment
were submitted
cards.
according
were
to
submitted.
the instructions outlined in the agenda on page 1 and 2 of the agenda.
Okay.
And are they to a specific agenda item?
Yes, the Wildwood update.
Okay, so then I would think that we will read those into the record when we get to the Wildwood update.
We could do that. They're fairly lengthy.
Yeah, no, I think for the record, they need to be actually read into the record.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Staff council agrees. That's fine. Thank you,
Thanks.
Claudia. Do we have a motion for the consent calendar? Mr. Huffer.
I'd like to move approval of the February 12th, 2020 meeting minutes.
And I'll second that
And
motion.
seconded. If no discussion or changes, may we have the roll call vote, please, for the minutes?
Vice Chair Bill de la Peña.
Yes.
Director Huffer.
Yes.
Director Jones.
Aye.
Director Nichols.
Yes.
Chair Skay.
I'll abstain. I was not at that meeting. Thank you. Let's go to our first action items. It's the 2020 COSCA, that's Caneo Open Space Trails Advisory Committee appointments. And that would be Ms. Humer.
Good evening, Chair Skay and members of the board. I have a brief PowerPoint. This year, we had 4 scheduled vacancies for COSCA. 7 applications were received during the recruitment period, and interviews were held on April 15th and 16th. Once the interviews were complete, the interview committee forwarded this information on to the nomination subcommittee. For members, the subcommittee recommends Mulaney Ashen, Steve Bacharach, Marcella Kettlehut, and Dorothy Sullivan. Mulaney is an avid hiker and is very active with the Trails Education Days and coordinates the letter writing contest. Steve is the current COSCA chairperson and coordinates the Caneo Open Space Challenge as well as the Trail Watch program. Marcella is active with Trails Education Days, the Trail Ambassadors program, and Trailhead Outreach. Dorothy coordinates the Trail Safety and Courtesy Skit for Trails Education Days, helps coordinate trail work days, and participates in the Adopt a Trail program. And with regard to alternates, the subcommittee recommends the following applicants: Raymond Ray de los Reyes, Joel Hayes, and Trevor Pereira. Ray is a mountain biker who enjoys interacting with people and is interested in participating in the Trails Ambassador program. Joel is a hiker and a mountain biker interested in giving back to the community and participating in the Ambassador program as well. And Trevor is a hiker and is interested in increasing awareness about open space and participating in Trails Education Days and Trail Workday programs. With that, staff recommends that the Board of Directors approve the COSTAC members and alternates as recommended by the Nomination Subcommittee. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Ms. Huber?
I do, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Claudia.
Thank you. I see that we will have one equestrian again on the on COSTAC, and I was wondering, have we been receiving any applications from equestrians, or has it been a while since we received any applications from equestrians?
It's been a while since we've received applications from equestrians, but we do have several equestrians that participate in our Trail Watch and Trail Ambassadors program.
Okay. When you say several, are they do that regularly, or how are they involved?
Yes, they log their, since it's a volunteer program, they log their hours as they're able to do their monitoring and go on the rides in open space. They don't, as you probably know, they don't follow a set schedule necessarily. Okay,
thank you.
All right. Do we have, yes, Director Nichols.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for staff. I notice there's a variety of interests here, and actually individuals have a variety themselves. Is there a recommendation as far as certain number of interests represented on this group to make sure there's a balance, or is it just a matter of who's interested and we just take it as it comes?
That depends largely on any given year's applicant pool. And so we, based on the cross-section, so to speak, or who's in that applicant pool, we make the selection based on the information we glean from the interviews.
And thank you. And is there any recruitment effort other than just posting notice? In other words, to try to get people involved? Because I mean, I've always appreciated this group. They're always very active and dedicate a lot of time and effort. And I didn't know if it's just by osmosis, people just hear about it and become interested, or if there's an active effort to get people involved.
So this year, the city clerk's office always assists us with the recruitment. And so this year, a press release was published in the Acorn. At the time recruitment started, all the COVID-related issues were manifesting themselves. So we were not able to broadcast this as much on social media as we typically would, because we were very busy with getting other messaging out relating to social distancing, proper safety, and then eventually the closures.
Okay. And then one last question. I noticed there are some bicyclists and also mountain bikers, and I didn't know if that was distinguishing between one or the other, or just a term of art.
They should be synonymous. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure. It's just more of a curiosity than anything else. But thank you very much for the report.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other comments, or do we have a motion to adopt the slate?
I move staff recommendations.
Thank you, Ms. Bill de la Pena. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Director Huffer. All right. If no other comments or questions, may we have the roll call, please?
Vice Chair Bill de la Pena,
Yes.
Director Huffer,
Yes.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Nichols,
Yes.
Chair Skay.
Yes. Our next item is authority to accept a 58-acre parcel of open space in the Dos Vientos open space area from Leonard Holmes, and approval of an agreement to facilitate required restoration on the property. Mr. Stark, can you give us a report?
Good evening, Chair Skay and members of the board. This item is to accept 58 acres of open space into our system and to approve a restoration agreement. I have a brief PowerPoint that I will go through. So to set the stage here, this is out in Dos Vientos. This is will be acquisition of 58 acres. It's immediately adjacent to what's the name of the park? Del Prado Park. This was part of a tentative track map 4559V, was approved by the Thousand Oaks Planning Commission on March 27th of 1989. Property is approximately 58 acres. Well, the property you're looking at here is 63 acres. We're proposing to acquire 58 acres of it. It's currently owned by Leonard Holmes of California. The original development conditions to the surrounding development areas required the granting of Lot 10 in this tract, which is this property here, for public open space. The conditions specifically require the land to be free of weed abatement areas, manufactured slopes, drainage structures, roads, and other land disturbances. The map here on the left shows the portion of the property that COSCA will be accepting. This is 58 acres of the 63. The final boundary was determined in order to avoid areas that had some drainage structures, a paved road, and some weed abatement areas. We've received a survey and an acceptable legal description to be included into a deed. The last remaining condition for the transfer here involves the repair of a portion of the land where vegetation and soil has been disturbed by the construction of bicycle jumps, as you can see in the picture here. COSCA and Leonard Holmes have prepared an agreement to ensure the restoration of the bicycle track. The site will be returned to its natural contours and then hydroseeded with a mix of native plant seeds. Restoration will be complete within 60 days of the property transfer, and Leonard Holmes will post a deposit prior to the transfer to ensure the completion of the work. In summary, we're proposing accepting 58 acres. There are existing trails there that are used, and they're in nice condition. Staff recommends accepting the property from Leonard Holmes and also approving the restoration agreement. I'm now able to take any questions you might have.
All right. Board members, any questions of Mr. Stark? Yes, Director Huffer.
I just wanted to make sure I was reading this correctly. The one seems like problem area in this property is the small area that's been turned into a bicycle track. And if I read it correctly, the Leonard folks repaired that, and then it's been recreated into the bicycle track again. Once if this is agreed to, am I correct that Leonard is responsible for one more time to get rid of the bicycle pump track, and after that, it's our problem?
You are correct.
Okay. And I'm blocking on the name of the group, but there is a group of bicyclists who have been very instrumental in working with us at Sapway Trails and the bicycle features there. Has there been any reaching out to that group to see if they might be able to work with whoever these folks are in Newbury Park and Dos Vientos?
Not yet, but I think part of the problem is not exactly knowing who these people are. It sort of happens when nobody's looking. So we have not identified the parties involved. Once we take ownership and the restoration's been complete, we anticipate that we'll have to give some more attention to this area. This is not an uncommon thing. It usually takes several attempts here until they move on to some other place. If we're able to make contact, COSCA has no objection to the existence of bicycle tracks, just not on COSCA open space.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions of staff? Yes, Director Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up to that, Mr. Stark, is access to this particular location where the bike track is access being able to, could we prevent access to that, or is it just one of those areas that kind of hard to regulate?
Part of it's fenced down below because it's right next to a county retention basin down there. We could put some fencing in the area. We do plan to do some signage in the area. We have to post the area for no trespassing if we expect to be able to, enforce, the compliance out there. It's in a remote area, though, so sometimes fencing isn't all that successful. I think what it takes is just some human attention, until we can solve that issue.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Director Jones, go ahead.
or Madam Chairman, pardon me. I wanted to inquire about flood control. We had a case, and Chuck Huffer may remember it. We're up at the north end of Calle del Prado, I believe. In the heavy rain they had one year, a hillside came down and filled a gentleman's swimming pool and part of the house. And because COSCA had not taken over, we didn't know who the owner was. The man wanted the park district to take care of his problem, the COSCA, and it turned out that it was up to the homeowners association, and it cost them several $100,000 to not only clean up the property, but to put in a new storm drain. I'm just wondering, are there any storm problems relative to this property that could influence that track just to the south and west of it?
The site of where the bike track is at is in a somewhat isolated, very small, carved out drainage. There's no evidence today that heavy rains we've experienced even over the last 2 years have substantially altered the natural contour, out those contours that are natural. When we do the restoration work, we'll be hydroseeding the area to help restabilize the hillsides, but there's no evidence of sloughing or unusual drainage problems on the site. You'll notice that we eliminated some of the site. We're not taking the whole thing because there are some drainage structures, some concrete V-ditches. So we had those excluded to leave the responsibility for those areas with the current developer, current owner.
Yeah, well, I see in the paperwork that you provided that there was an erosion control plan in B23 and slope landscaping in B26 and soils and drainage reports, and it talked about major storm drain facilities and retention basins.
Yes.
So it looks like they did quite a bit of work for storm drains and stormwater retention. Have you, I normally would go to the property. I've got a little under the weather the last couple of days. Do you see that there might be any danger to any homes out there?
I have not seen anything that I believe would cause that. In the Planning Commission resolution I circulated with the package, those are conditions of approval for an entire tract, and a much larger area than just this lot. So most of those conditions didn't relate to land that was destined for open space, but land that was destined for development.
I see. But I mean, you've been out there, I presume, have you not?
Yes.
And my question is, do you see any slopes that lead to any of those houses that we see to the south and to the west that might pose any flood problem?
I have not observed such.
Okay. I just don't want to be COSCA to be liable.
Well, there are homes in the area, but the place is well vegetated and appears stable.
Thank you.
Okay. Any
Madam
other-
Chair,
Yes, Director.
following
Belvin.
up on Director Jones's comments, I believe that government agencies are immune to any claims that are caused by acts of God. Would that be correct?
I would defer to City Attorney. Alicia?
Vice Chair Bill De La Pena, the agency would be immune from claims involving injuries or damages that occurred on natural condition of the property. So we would have immunity from anybody lodging a complaint or a claim with COSCA based upon activity on the property that's in its natural condition. So the property is being restored. It's being restored to its natural condition. And so I don't see a liability issue here with respect to this lot.
Great, thank you. It is notable that transfers of a size as this one, 58 acres, is really not happening all that often. And I was fretting about the Rasno Peak and the 60-plus acres transfer taking 7.5 years, but this one is 31 years in the making. So I feel a little better about this, about the Rasno transition and acquisition, time-wise, that is. So if I don't have any other questions or comments, I would like to move to accept the transfer.
All right, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Director Nichols, seconds?
I'll second that, but I did have an additional question.
Yes, please, comments.
Mr. Stark, you had mentioned that part of the reason for excluding that midsection was because of a road and V-ditches and the paved road. Is having a paved road crossing COSCA just something that the agency chooses to avoid? It seems to me that there are other instances where there are paved roads and maybe an easement that crosses those. Is that not correct?
COSCA does have paved road on at least one that I know. It's not completely unusual. What's out on this property now is a service road to a water tank, and that's I think that's Cal Water, Cal American. So it's a service road. We have the roads were built with they were excavated, compacted fill. It's a manufactured element of the landscape, so we would prefer not to have those.
Okay, so it's not necessarily just because it's a paved road, but because of this site and the way it was designed that there was a choice made not to include it then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And just as a follow-up to Director Bill De La Pena, some of these conditions in this plan that went to the Planning Commission, I was on the staff when we put those in there. So it gives you an idea of how long it's been. So, with that concludes any questions I had. Thank you.
So you can see your work of 31 years ago. Huh?
Yes. And I'm only 32 years old.
Okay. So. If no other comments, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Vice Chair Bill De La Pena,
Yes.
Director Huffer,
Yes?
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Nichols,
Yes.
Chair Skay.
Yes. Next item is an exciting one. It's the allocation framework for the Southern California Edison settlement funds. Mr. Stark.
Just get
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to find out about the public comments. Were they for item 6C or are they for other comments? I mean,
They're for item 7A.
7A, all of them? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay.
Chair Skye, before we move forward, I just wanted to backtrack to make sure we weren't missing something on the prior item. We also had, besides the acceptance of the property, we did have the approval of the restoration agreement with Leonard Holmes. I want to make sure that that's in the
Yeah,
record.
I believe that was inherent in the motion, but I will defer to the motion maker. I believe that was you, Director Bill De La Pena.
Yes, the answer is yes. It's all
right,
included.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So please proceed with the SCE settlement allocation.
Okay, well, the next item is discussion of a preliminary allocation framework for settlement funds from Southern California Edison. This item dates back to 2018 in November when the Woolsey fire came through the Conejo Valley and points beyond. It burned all the way to the coast and was devastating for our region. Among the acreage burned were approximately 3,500 acres of natural lands owned by COSCA, and our business is managing open space and habitat land, and so the restoration of this damage is important and a high priority for COSCA. The cause of the fire was ultimately found to be an electrical infrastructure owned by Southern California Edison, and once this was determined, COSCA joined other public agencies in seeking funds for restoring damaged infrastructure and natural resources on COSCA open space. A settlement was reached to provide this funding to restore these resources. Staff has created a preliminary framework for the restoration funds to project types that most closely address the specific losses. Projects in these areas will address fire damage in the spirit of the settlement and in consistency with COSCA's strategic plan. The ultimate purpose of this framework is to direct the use of these funds to address damages caused by the fire and make COSCA open space whole again. The framework will be used to evaluate specific project proposals that best address fire damage. We have not yet identified specific projects, but this is a framework by which we will use to evaluate future proposals. Among the damages were invasive species expansion on open space, and you can see from our slide, while some of the community might find this mustard beautiful, for managers of native open space, it's a little less than beautiful. The Woolsey fire did cause expansion of invasive plant species and has degraded valuable wildlife habitats. Managing invasive species will allow for the natural habitats to recover naturally. Some of these areas will need additional restoration work as well that may involve replanting native plants. Priority areas will be based on initial invasive plant management and restoration planning. We need to make sure that we're looking system-wide and in these burned areas for the areas where we can be most successful. Staff recommend allocating 32% of the settlement funds on habitat restoration and weed management. There are some areas that will not recover because they were just severely burned and they didn't have the higher quality habitat to start with. Perhaps the best way to be made whole again in these places is by acquiring land that has resources that are already in good condition. COSCA's existing conservation priorities are well aligned with the resources lost in the fire. The acquisitions are consistent with COSCA's strategic plan, and the staff recommends allocating 32% of settlement funds to support priority acquisitions. We're also proposing a section for land management activities. Some of these, our impacts, we had trail and land erosion from winter rains following the fire, the creation of social trails. We lost signage, fencing, gates. And these photos are just some of the things that we've encountered. With denuded land, we get a lot faster runoff, and we're continuing to see erosion problems out on the land. We'd like to be able to address those. And we'd also like to, we won't be building a whole lot more bridges. We're building one someday, but there were recreational losses during the fire as well. We lost open days on the preserve, so people weren't able to go out while they were closed. And we also had a degraded quality of the outdoor experience on this land. So this section of our recommendation is to address land management issues, kind of in a general sense. This next section is Vegetation and Fuel Management Reserve. COSCA and our partner agencies conduct weed abatement on over 420 acres in the Conejo Valley. As more property is added to our conservation portfolio, it is expected that this responsibility will increase. In some wetter years, many sites need multiple treatments, and that increases the costs. For instance, last year, not the current year, but we had to do the weed abatement work on some sites 3 times, and it does drive the costs up. Staff recommends a reserve fund to bolster our capacity in busy years and an allocation of 8% of settlement funds. The fire no doubt had a big impact on our community and our neighbors and community expectations. Community fire safety is a partnership between our local fire department, owners and managers of open space like COSCA, and individual landowners. A successful partnership requires all partners to understand their roles and what actions can be taken to support public safety and avoid the loss of homes and businesses. Funds allocated to this program will support creation and distribution of educational materials, coordination between agencies to plan for wildfire response and safety, and sharing information with local residents about how they can protect their homes. COSCA recommends an allocation of 4% of allocation funds to this program. Efficiently managing a large recovery program requires investments in COSCA's management capacity. This allocation will enhance the capacity of COSCA by funding essential equipment, communication, products, training, temporary administrative assistance, and other capacity building needs. Some sample uses, but not necessarily an exclusive list, would include GPS technology for field mapping, automated trail counters so we can better understand use patterns on recreational use, tools, machinery, and updated outreach materials, including our website and brochures, possibly some temporary volunteer management, software, and other types of support devices. Staff recommends allocating 4% of the settlement funds to build COSCA's capacity. This chart's a summary of how we see dividing this up. I use the percentages in this chart rather than the dollars because this is how staff views the damages that we experienced. They were centered on burning land and natural resources. Historically, COSCA has not had the resources to expend to do a lot of land management work. This is a unique opportunity while we're helping our land recover to invest in those long-term goals of COSCA to be stewarding the habitats for local birds and wildlife. I'm able to take your questions at this time.
Very, very well thought out. Questions of Mr. Stark? Yes, Director Huffer.
Yeah, Brian, first of all, I'd like to thank you and any other staff involved. I realize this is a framework, but the different categories that you've outlined here, I think are really appropriate, and the percentages certainly make sense. I'm glad to see that you're suggesting about a third of the funds might go toward land acquisition, but as you pointed out in the written presentation, that COSCA is moving from land acquisition to land management, and with the exception of the land acquisition, and again, understanding that this is just a framework without any details, but it seems like most of these other areas, the weed management, land management, enhanced vegetation management, are all areas that are going to be very labor intensive. Is this going to require additional staffing, or are you thinking perhaps that some or much of this might be contracted out, or what approaches might be taken on these?
We haven't really gone that far down the road until we get them, but it's likely, today COSCA does not have the field staff and capacity to be managing multiple, on the land restoration projects. So if we were to be doing this today, we'd be looking at contracted work. At the same time, we do have planning capacity on our staff to develop the priorities for restoration and to kind of rough out the project designs that we'd be looking at. But the physical labor would likely be contracted.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Director Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stark, I just want to again commend you as well as Mr. Huffer did on the structure and organization and thought that went through this document. It seems like you have really captured what I consider to be the essence of what needs to be done for this agency in particular as we move forward. I think with the fire, with the COVID impacts that we've seen to our resources, particularly Wildwood, which is on our agenda later tonight, it's kind of highlighted some of the issues that we need to be focusing on. And we did talk about a couple of acquisitions that we had this evening as far as land acquisition, but we're definitely moving into the need to do more resource management, and this certainly highlighted that. And with that in mind, I would like to see more percentages, and I'm not going to get into the details of the numbers, but I think as we move from land acquisition into focusing more on land management, that there should be an increased percentage in the land management category to address that. We just can't keep doing the way things have been done for years, although it's been successful. That we need to move into this next category and do so in a strong way and to focus more on land management. And then secondarily, regarding the community fire prevention, I think that is also an excellent use of the funds because that's definitely what caused some of this, or at least what was an outcome or consequence of this. And I know with the help of the Ojai Fire Safe Council, the County of Ventura has a community wildfire protection plan. And I would like to use that as a platform and incorporate that with how can we specifically use what was developed in that document and hone that into how do we address that to our own Conejo Valley and say how do we take that structure and now apply it. So I don't know if that requires additional funding to do that because that is already an existing document that just needs to be refined to how we apply it here locally. But it certainly should be a part of that. So that whole emphasis on bringing the whole community together and say, hey, this fire affected the community. Now how can we use this funds to benefit the community? And I think that would be an excellent use. But otherwise, thank you for pulling that together. I think you did a great job.
Well, in response to that, I wanted to let the board know I have been in touch with the Fire Safe Council that their community wildfire protection planning framework is well established and would be a reasonable way to collaborate.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Director Jones, go ahead.
Yeah, of the allocations that we have seen here, I think they're very well planned. But if we find in the future that we need to change the pots of money a little bit, do we have that flexibility to maybe move some of this money around if we find that in a few years we might need it in another area?
Two responses to that question. One is I think it's reasonable to always, evaluate this framework periodically. One thing I failed to mention in my earlier proposal is that 10% of the settlement is listed as unallocated reserve. So that we've set funds aside that could be redirected as we learn more about how our projects are influencing the recovery of the land, and if we see other opportunities that come up, we'll be ready to consider those, and there would be available resources.
Well, other than that fund that you mentioned, the 10%, are any of these areas capable of being adjusted one to another one if we find that one area needs more funds than another?
I think that that's a realistic expectation as we begin developing projects and the budgets for those. We'll get a sense at that time about, this will all be ground truthed as we start preparing projects. And there's nothing that I think in the approval of this framework as we get started that would prevent us from revisiting this.
So we could revisit it and reallocate some of the funds to different purposes.
Conceivably, yes.
Conceivably?
Well, I mean, this is sort of like that.
You're not answering me very directly, but
The board can, if revisiting this on a specific interval is helpful for the board, staff is happy to work with the board on that.
But you're saying we could modify these allocations?
Yes, I believe what I'm asking for approval today is sort of the first step as we enter into the process of restoring the land. And I fully expect that we will continue to learn things about the damages and what opportunities we have to repair them. And if necessary, I believe it's appropriate to revisit the allocations.
All right, if you're ready for a motion, Madam Chairman, with that in mind, I will move approval.
All
And I'll
right.
second it.
Been moved and seconded, and we have another comment from Director Huffer.
Yeah, just a comment for Director Jones. The recommendation that we are being asked to approve is it specifically says it's a draft allocation framework. So my interpretation of that is the percentages are not locked in stone.
I'll go by the Huffer interpretation.
Okay, and that actually was mine as well, that this was a draft in that I don't think we're going to be holding it to the penny for each allocation if we do need to adjust. And clearly, it can come back to the board for reports on how the various categories are progressing. So, but I really appreciate the well thought out framework here.
Well, when I put the draft on here was because you hadn't seen it yet. We are asking and recommending that the board approve these percentages now, so staff can begin the process of planning for the projects. And as we learn that and ideas come up, it's perfectly reasonable to revisit these. But staff would like to have something to go forward with, so we knew conceptually what we had to work with.
Of course.
Well, I think it's a good plan.
Thank you, Director Jones. Any other comments from members? If not, may we have the roll call vote?
Vice Chair Bill de la Pena,
Yes.
Director Huffer,
Yes.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Nichols,
Yes.
Chair Skay.
Yes. We will now go to the Wildwood update. This is a verbal report by Mr. Stark. Perhaps I should start off reading these comments that came in, and then if you need to address them in your report, you can do
Okay.
that. Very small print, so forgive me here. From Anonymous, we have a comment. We live close to the Wildwood Park parking lot and applaud the decision to temporarily close Paradise Falls. As a result, our residential street is quiet and trash-free again and no longer choked with park visitor cars. If and when the decision is made to reopen Paradise Falls, please have a parallel plan in place to address the resumption of neighborhood street congestion, noise, and littering that will inevitably result. Unfortunately, the sign asking hikers not to park on residential streets are routinely ignored, particularly when the parking lot starts to fill up. Something more effective like resident-only parking will be needed. Just as the park needs protection, so does our neighborhood. Thank you. And then from Michalk, sorry, the name is Mark Lichalk. I just wanted to commend your decision to close access to the Wildwood Falls following the problems caused by social media and the COVID-19 reopening. Although there have been some loud complaints about the closure, the vast majority of people in the Wildwood neighborhood that I've talked to feel it was the right decision. Thanks to social media, the falls have turned from a special natural place into a swimming hole party location. And this is not just a recent issue resulting from COVID-19, but this is an ongoing problem that has been growing for years. The dramatic drop of cars in the parking lot and neighborhood resulting from this closure is evidence that the falls is the major driver of outside traffic to the area. Let the falls and surrounding area recover for a while, and I'd strongly recommend not reopening access to it until a long-term solution to deal with the social media impact on the falls and surrounding neighborhood has been determined. Thank you for taking this action and watching out for the health of nature in the park, the rangers who must deal with the public, and the residents in the nearby neighborhood. And finally, we have a comment from Bonnie Clarfield-Bylan. Just a note to recognize the good efforts of COSCA and the TO Police for preventing a repeat of the Memorial Day event that caused Paradise Falls to become a swimming hole destination. Due to the COVID-19 closures at other water destinations and outdoor gathering places and social networking, it was the perfect storm. As a Wildwood resident, I had never seen such a flood of people leading into the park with pool beach apparel rather than hiking equipment. If Paradise Falls had not been immediately closed, it could have become a forever destination for this kind of incompatible recreation. Also, as I have expressed before, I support keeping the Avenida de los Árboles trailheads and parking area in the official Wildwood Regional Park entrance, as Hill Canyon is not Wildwood Regional Park. I do agree that with dust abatement, the heavy use of the lot causes the air to carry a lot of dust. Even with dust abatement, sorry. Perhaps a plan to hardscape the lot would be prudent. The lot serves Thousand Oaks residents and out-of-town visitors who want to access trails on Wildwood Mesa, Wildwood Canyon, and Montclef Ridge. The residential streets are public and only serve as overflow parking. And that concludes those comments. So would you go ahead with your report, please?
Thank you, Chair Skay and members of the board. This report is intended to bring the COSCA board up to date on actions COSCA has taken over the past 3 months to manage community use of open space and to address more acute issues at Wildwood Park. I'll kind of go through some of our recent history. In mid-March, following the issuance of stay-at-home orders, COSCA began to experience large numbers of visitors. The numbers of people at parking lots created immediate concerns about social distancing and compliance with local health orders. In response, COSCA implemented a public messaging campaign through local newspapers and social media asking visitors to practice social distancing. Over 150 social distancing signs were deployed throughout the open space and at trailheads. We had hoped to keep the open space open, as we believe outdoor recreation is vital to the physical and mental health of our community. However, the closures of open space and trails in Los Angeles County yielded unsustainable visitor numbers that risked the health of visitors as well as risking damage to the open space. We simply couldn't be the only open space system open for most of Southern California. On March 28th, trails were closed to the public due to this crowding, damaged open space areas, and parking problems in our adjacent neighborhoods. Trails remained closed for approximately 30 days. Compliance with the closure was not 100%, but conditions remained, but the condition was still safe, and damage to the open space was mitigated. On April 22nd, which we didn't even plan it to be Earth Day, but it was, COSCA began phased reopening of trails by opening for weekday-only walk-up visits. The parking lots remained closed to prevent the people from getting too close together. Signage was in place to promote the social distancing, and compliance was generally good for the weekdays. On May 8th, COSCA trails opened for weekend use. The Hill Canyon trailhead at that point was the only parking lot that was open, and we left that trailhead that place open because not everybody, most people in the Conejo Valley can walk to a local trailhead, and we were really trying to encourage people to walk, but not everybody can, and so Hill Canyon was chosen as a place that people could drive to. COSCA's trail opening was coordinated with the opening of Los Angeles County parks, state parks in Los Angeles and Ventura counties, and national parks in both counties. So there was a great deal of coordination. By mid-May, the remaining parking lots were open while maintaining some protective measures. After a week of being open, we began to experience, again, exceedingly high numbers of visitors. Most open space areas were able to accommodate this, but we continue to have struggles over at Wildwood Park. We learned that many visitors were traveling upwards of 50 miles to visit Wildwood, and about 80% of the visitors were coming specifically to go to Paradise Falls. We attribute the increase to social media and coverage of the falls in regional publications over which COSCA has no control. The overvisitation resulted in significant damage to the area around the falls, including extreme loads of garbage, trampling of wetland vegetation, and unsafe behaviors. Formerly, the falls were mostly a stop along a scenic hike through Wildwood Park. However, current visitors were coming prepared to spend hours at this small location, arriving with coolers and barbecues and other unusual items. In response, COSCA closed the falls on May 29th, and it remains closed today. Enforcement of this has been a challenge, but we've been fortunate to receive valuable help from the Thousand Oaks Police Department. Since the closure, visitor numbers have started to taper back to somewhat normal levels, and we're less dependent on law enforcement for assistance, but they remain close by and on call. It's important to note that COSCA is not alone in managing very high visitor numbers. Agencies throughout the nation, and acutely here in Southern California, have been having the same issues, and we're all in communication with each other to share management ideas. Other waterfalls in Southern California have also been closed, and such as the popular Punch Bowls above Santa Paula, they remain closed for the same reason. Eaton Canyon Falls were closed down in Los Angeles County. They were able to reopen with a reservation system. That works well there because there's only one entrance, but Wildwood has about 20. Before I take any questions, I'd like to just summarize the actions COSCA has taken to protect the public and our valuable natural resources. We've updated rules and recommendations to advise visitors of social distancing recommendations and the necessity of complying with county health orders. We've deployed over 150 signs with information about social distancing and requirements for trail etiquette. We've provided updated trail information to news outlets via press releases and to the public through social media channels and our website. We were able to obtain extensive coverage throughout Los Angeles County via news articles and television stories. That was always a challenge for COSCA because our message wasn't getting down to Los Angeles, but we were fortunate this time around that we had a compelling story that was able to reach a lot of people. Our social media posts during this period were seen by over 300,000 viewers. We've been coordinating messages with other agencies throughout Ventura and Los Angeles counties through the LA County Trail Reopening Task Force. This is a task force of about 40 different agencies that manage parks and trails throughout Los Angeles County. They were kind enough to let a Ventura County agency kind of sneak into the group and participate, and we've really gained a lot from their collective experience. We've updated the forms used by our Trail Watch, Adopt a Trail, and Trail Ambassador programs to collect information about compliance with rules and recommendations. Volunteers are collecting this information to assist staff in evaluating the efficacy of our management actions. We have had staff and volunteers help with trail counts. I even went out for 3 hours and counted people one day, and in 3 hours I counted about 1,000 people coming into the waterfall area, so we were seeing rates of about 300 people per hour. The CRPD and city staff have been extremely helpful with sign production and placement and for providing valuable advice on rapidly changing priorities. The level of teamwork that's come together behind COSCA from our parent agencies is big and truly appreciated. And lastly, I want to I want you to know that the COSCA Rangers have done an outstanding job in managing open space signage, ensuring visitor safety on COSCA trails. They've been enforcing our closures. They've been doing all of this while still, during their busiest time of year, so while still maintaining trails, brushing the weeds back, responding to neighbor issues and concerns. I just couldn't be more proud of the field operations. They've really shown their can-do spirit during this time. Staff will continue to monitor local and state health directives, the trail status of neighboring trails agencies, and conditions at COSCA open space. We're prepared to make further adjustments as needed, but we hope that now that day use areas that people have traditionally gone and taken their barbecue to are open, and we hope that people will kind of return back to their normal use of our open space areas. But if you like, I could respond to a few of the public comments at this time too. I think it's reasonable for us to continue to work on parking issues in the neighborhood. We're sensitive to that issue. We did make parking lots available up at the Wildflower Playfields and at Wildwood Neighborhood Park, and those were well used. I know that that's not necessarily a permanent solution for all times, because those parks are also used, as parks. So we want to be sensitive to the parking needs of those groups too. We don't really have a timeline yet for the, when the falls might open. We're taking it on a week-to-week basis. What we're looking at is if we have the usage that we've had, say, over the last 2 weeks at least, that we think that the parking shouldn't be such a big problem. But when the time comes that it opens, we'll be mindful and watching out for those things. With regard to the dust near that area, COSCA did apply a dust suppressant layer there prior to opening the parking lot after the closure. The product that's on there is pretty effective, and I don't think at this point that is the area that's generating as much of the dust. Wildwood Park has roads running through it. It's a natural area with exposed soil, and when the wind whips up, it's like any place that's adjacent to nature. That am I not loud enough? Okay. As far as hardscaping the lot, we don't necessarily think that's the best idea. There's some constraints to doing that, and so we've chosen not to do that at this time. At this point, I'm able to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Brian, and I do want to applaud Brian for being an active participant in the LA County Department of Parks and Recreation every other week trails task force. It has been very valuable for all the agencies to hear the common problems, and they are common problems for sure. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Stark? Yes, Director Nichols.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Stark, for the presentation. I'm sure there are lots of lessons learned from this whole process, including how we work well with neighbors and our friends and acquaintances in the trail business. But I'm just questioning, kind of thinking back to what we talked about before, the whole land management, resource management concept, and the assessment of the Paradise Falls within Wildwood on a week-to-week basis. Do you foresee anything like permanent trail closures or realignment or fencing or signage or fines or things like that to try and address this type of thing? Because with social media, the falls are still going to always be there, and it'll still always be attractive. And whether it's a COVID virus or a week-long heat event, it's going to be attractive. So are you considering some significant changes other than just retreating back to where things were and the way things were and hoping that people are going to comply, which traditionally they have up until recently? Is any of that on the table at this point?
Well, traditionally, issues like this isn't the first time that we've had issues like this, even with the falls. The social media popularity is a cyclical thing, so it comes up and we're forced to deal with it, and then it kind of fades. But since we don't control it, it's hard to keep it away. We haven't considered putting the falls in a pipe yet. Maybe that would make it less attractive. Just joking there. But I think what this causes us to think about is how are we allocating our existing staff resources. When things blow up at Wildwood, they consume most of our resources, and so there's always something that's given up when we move over to one of these situations. So we'll have to take a close look over time at how we might apply the resources we have, or bring in other available resources.
And just to, thank you. And just to follow up regarding the fencing, I know that there is fencing out there already, and some of it's just for safety and precautions because of the precarious nature of the site along the trails. Is there something that's needed above and beyond that, or is it just a matter of folks adhering to what's in existence?
Ideally, people would adhere to what's there. Fencing has its place in the open space when there's safety issues and we're trying to inform the public about its proper use. If there's a fence there, it's there because we don't want people going over it. Although we do need to be sensitive to the aesthetic of the outdoors and why do people come to a natural place like that. So throughout COSCA's open space system, one of the things people don't see is an aggressive form of fencing or a whole lot of signage. The natural beauty is still important for COSCA. So I think in the long term, it still boils down to what are our community values, and can we get our messages out there for the public to appreciate them. What we've learned here, though, is that our public at Wildwood isn't just Conejo Valley residents. I think we were able to make some strides in terms of making media contacts in the Los Angeles area. And I think the extensive reach of those did help quell some of this demand. So we may need to resort to more of that as we go.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that about fences, because I feel the same way. If it's a safety issue, by all means, warn people, let them know. But to just, fence it, or like you say, put a glass tube around it so you can see it and touch it, but you can't smell it, that's not the purpose of it. So I agree. But obviously there's some lessons learned. We'll have to move forward with what we've learned and continue to work with that. But I do thank you for the efforts, and again, the rangers and the police and all that have been involved, because I know it's been a moving target and a very taxing on the staff, so thank you.
And I'm wondering if at some point, don't want to call it a sting operation, but targeted enforcement and very aggressive issuing of citations to folks that aren't following the rules. Oftentimes that means the word gets out, and at least for a time, it is labor intensive, but it's maybe a tool that we could use at some point.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Director Bill de la Pena.
Thank you. I do have a question, and the question is, can residents volunteer for cleanups and other activities at Wildwood Park, or just for COSCA in general, after pictures surfaced of trash and loitering and just really disgusting traces left behind by park visitors? People were contacting me to offer help to clean up. So my question is where do people who want to volunteer to clean up, where do they go?
We've received a number of contacts of people interested in this too. In the immediate moment, when we saw trash, we did deploy extra resources. We were able to bring in a groundskeeper from the Parks District. At this time, our resources were so consumed with just kind of defending the environment, that there wasn't a lot of overhead and bandwidth within COSCA to spend organizing volunteers. We know that over the long haul for COSCA, I believe organizing and developing and strategically using volunteers should be a big part of our future. We're working on how we can allocate resources to make something like that happen. In the meantime, people who are interested in volunteering, we refer over to, they can go to the Conejo Open Space Foundation website and they can sign up for activities. Since the COVID pandemic, we've been wary to organize groups of people to work together just because it's a higher risk activity. And when we had so many people down at the falls with garbage that people touched and everything, that I didn't feel completely comfortable in sending a lot of volunteers and in any numbers down into that situation. But as we regroup and plan for the future, I believe we'll be able to do that.
I think that makes sense because the cat is out of the bag in terms of the beauty that Wildwood has to offer, in fact, all of the Conejo Valley. So we will now, from now on, remain a tourist attraction no matter what. So volunteers may be needed in terms of cleanup. And during this pandemic, as you say, it's going to be difficult to organize groups of volunteers, but that's something to keep in mind for the future after this has passed.
Absolutely.
Thank you. If no other comments or questions, why don't we go on to a timely topic, the COSCA Volunteer Corps activity. Ms. Huber.
Thank you, Chair Skay. I have a brief PowerPoint. With regard to the Trail Watch and Trail Adoption programs, and Trail Ambassadors included, we logged the following hours from February through May of this year. Trail Watch had 198 reports and 332 hours donated. Trail Ambassadors had 55 reports and 87 hours donated, and Adopt a Trail had 86 reports and 272 hours donated. We really appreciate all the efforts of our so many of the amazing volunteers that we have. We couldn't be where we are today without all those hours and dedication from all those people. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Building on Director Bill De La Pena's question about volunteers to help clean up Paradise Falls and Wildwood in particular, is that something that the Trail Ambassadors or COSTAC might put in for a future Trails Work Day?
It's conceivable that we could have a future trail work day there, but the overriding factor would be when it's safe to have volunteers do that.
Thank you, because we don't know if we have a budget for issuing PPE to everybody that wants to come out and help.
Right.
All right. Yes, Director Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Ms. Huber, those numbers of volunteers, are those lots of reports by just a few people, or is that a few reports by lots of people when it comes to volunteers?
Those are lots of reports from lots of people.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't have a spreadsheet with me that lists, that's actually still on my desk, the reports that we pulled from the trail logging software, or when people report their hours. But yeah, it's a pretty substantial core of people.
Oh, great. That's what I just wanted to clarify. It's more of a robust group than it is just a very active group of a small number then. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Any questions or comments from Ms. Huber? Hearing none, let's go to Matt Kuba, Ranger Operations and Maintenance Activities.
Matt Kuba.
Hello, everyone. I do miss you all. I do have a PowerPoint. It's relatively short. We The Rangers have been obviously very, very busy. This is in the before times when you could be around without a mask and such, but I did want to show a pretty picture of the Rangers to start off with. Next slide, please. We have been working weed abatement and trail clearing. Part of that is complying with the Migratory Bird Act, and if you look in the center of that screen, there's a killdeer, which is a ground nesting bird, and we survey every parcel and every trail that we're working on for birds, and if we find something, next slide please, we do have protocols for it, and killdeer tend to stay in a small area until the eggs hatch and then they disperse. So while the eggs are there, we set up a perimeter around it, and then we were able to do our weed abatement, and then they went out and ate all the bugs that were brought up by the weed abatement. Next slide. This is a typical trail that we've been dealing with. The Rangers have done about 65 miles of trail clearing since the last rain sometime in March. Next slide. And the after shot, so it's quite open. They can do about 2 to 3 miles a day with these weed machines, as long as it's relatively flat. It's a track-driven small flail mower, and it's very loud, and they're well-trained and lots of protective equipment. Next slide. This is the Green Meadow parking lot. Wanted to show you that every place was getting a lot of visits throughout this time and throughout the year. So, and pretty blue sky. That's always my favorite. Next slide. We do have some projects that we've had to get to. This is a little sequence with the Indian Creek Stair project. If you go down Indian Creek, you know that there's a lot of stairs there. It takes a lot of prep and a lot of tools that have to get hauled down the trail, so we load up. Next slide. Drag it all down there with our motorized wheelbarrows, which we've seen in the past, and do some dirt work and some drilling and some hammering and get the stairs in. Stair projects are one of my favorites. That's one thing I miss. You can finish it up and you look back and you get to go upstairs. So next slide. There was a little teeny fire, 5 acres over in the Lindmere area a morning a couple weeks ago. The Rangers went over to check on it. It was on our property, and they got up and got some pictures. So there's this one and the next photo. And a lot of it was just grass that just burned up, and the fire department was all over it very quickly. Next. So just to add on to what Brian was saying, with some of the signage that was developed and put out, encouraging distancing, weekend closures. Next. And with the Rangers, in order to sign all the trailheads when we did close down completely, it took them almost 3 days to set out all the signs because there's so many trailheads throughout the entire area, and there's so many that you don't even think of, and then you go, oh yeah, there's that one at Wildflower Playfields that goes underneath. So anyway, next. This is one of the ways we've been closing the trail that goes right down to the falls. The Rangers just pull the truck. We do have fencing there, but the Rangers pull the truck right up against the fencing and discourages people from going down there. Next slide. And then the sheriff down at just beyond number 4, heading towards the fall, has been very effective as well. Next. And yes, this is the picture that everybody saw that got everybody disturbed. But the operations on the weekends, I've luckily have access to the CRPD grounds crew. So we've had 2 grounds workers each Saturday and Sunday, and then 2 come in on Monday extra to help clean up. So we've been cleaning up as we go and after the weekends. So it does look pretty good. Next picture. We do fill up the truck multiple times in a day. So the trash is getting pulled out, and I do appreciate everybody that's volunteered to come down and help. Big thanks to the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, Public Works for helping out, and our CRPD Grounds Division, who really stepped up and nearly tripled our staffing abilities on the weekends. So next question, or next picture. Oh, there we go. You get 2 sunsets today. So this one was last week. Rangers took that out at Wildwood. And next one, that was out in my front yard the other night, so it made me happy. I love sunsets, you know that.
Yeah.
So I'm available for questions.
Beautiful, Matt. Questions of Mr. Kuba? Job well done, as always.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. We next have COSCA updates with our either the Mr. Friedel, or we don't have our city manager here today.
Keeping the group size really small. We have 10-person pods, so once the kids are with their 10 kids, that doesn't change, and we're keeping social distancing, and so we do that throughout the district, all over the district, including Wildwood Park, where we start in the Wildwood Neighborhood Park, and the kids get to go down and into Wildwood Park, and they in that camp get to actually go past the gate and go into where Paradise Falls is. So that's kind of a special bonus if you sign up for that camp. So CRPD is reopening, and we are doing it safely. So if you're looking for a place for your kid this summer, we are open.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Friedel? Hearing none, we'll go to board member comments. Any comments from members of the board?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Director Bill LaPena, go ahead.
I just wanted to express my gratitude to the COSCA Rangers, staff, and also volunteers, because since the lockdown, there has been immense pressure on our open space, our trails, and naturally, as a result of that, our staff, COSCA staff, and as we just saw in the presentation by Matt Kuba, it took a lot more than COSCA staff and rangers. It took the city of Thousand Oaks and police in order to maintain, manage, and clean up everything that our residents and neighboring counties have brought to the city of Thousand Oaks. So I just did not want it to go unnoticed that we really, really, really appreciate all of the hard work that our COSCA volunteers, staff, administration have put into this, and it is still ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. I would just like to mention that since the 4th of July holiday is coming up and the big municipal firework displays have been canceled all over the area, I know you're all concerned, as am I, that we don't have illegal fireworks going off in our neighborhoods, in our open space, and it's very disheartening seeing a report that this is a nationwide phenomenon. Ever since Memorial Day, apparently, random fireworks are going off in cities, and Studio City in LA, and Echo Park, and Baltimore, and New York City. So I don't know where people are getting these illegal fireworks, if they're smuggling them in somehow. But please, everyone who's watching, do not shoot off fireworks in this city or anywhere near any open space. Please. It's my plea. Yes, Director Nichols.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I too wanted to thank the ranger staff, but also the Park District staff and city staff for navigating through these difficult times. I know I've peppered our district general manager with a number of questions, city staff, Mr. Stark as well, on, why are we doing things? Can we do things differently? How do we get things open faster? People need to recreate. Trying to push the envelope a little bit. How can we move things along a little faster? And I know it's been quite a challenge on trying to be on our part, a recreation agency while still also trying to take heed from the public health director. And so it's been a bit of a challenge. So I just want to thank the staff for doing that, and the rangers who are our ground forces to do what needs to be done out there. Appreciate that. And also the regular updates that we've been receiving via email, just trying to keep us apprised on the various activities that are happening. So I just want to thank the staff for that. And I know it's a path that we've never had to navigate before and continues to unfold just one step at a time. But thank you all for doing the best you can. And I may still keep questioning you and pushing the envelope a little bit, but thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. I think,
Madam Chair?
yes, Director Jones.
Yeah, I'd like to add my thanks too to, I know this is a very difficult time, and I really appreciate Matt and all of the rest of the gang, Brian, and everybody involved for keeping us going in this period. And it's just, I know it must be very difficult for them with the COVID and all. And I see we're meeting again in September.
Whoops, did we lose you? I think your feed dropped off, Ed. No, he's off. All right. Thank you, Ed. If you can hear us, I appreciate your comments also. And if no other questions or comments, obviously we all second the kudos to this fantastic staff, both the ones that are here and the ones that are out in the field. All right, thank you, and we are adjourning to September 16th, and it may be in the same format. We shall see. Thank you all.